So we're now entering into 1942. And just a reminder, it's been a little over 2 years since the beginning of World War II in Europe when the Nazis invaded Poland. And even before that, as early as 1937, you've had all-out war between the Chinese and the Japanese. And even before that, you've had varying conflicts since the Japanese invasion of Manchuria in 1931. So Asia has been in conflict for some time. But as we go into 1942, the United States has just entered into World War II. You might remember, December 1941, Japan goes on a major offensive, tries to knock out the U.S. Pacific Fleet in Pearl Harbor, attacks Wake Island, attacks Guam, attacks Hong Kong, the Philippines, Singapore, Malaya. Then shortly thereafter goes after other possessions. Burma goes after the Dutch East Indies in its quest for natural resources. And so you can imagine, as we go into 1942, the Americans are eager to retaliate. And in these videos, these are overview videos. I'm not going to be able to talk about every action and every battle that happens. I'm just trying to give you kind of the highlights. But the first notable action in 1942 are the Doolittle Raid, or is the Doolittle Raid. Doolittle Raid, named after Colonel Doolittle, who's the architect of this raid. And the idea is not so much as a strategic victory, but more of a psychological one. If the U.S. could somehow attack the mainland of Japan, bomb the mainland of Japan, it would be a huge morale booster for the Americans, and it might cause the Japanese people to question their own leadership. And so the idea is send out a carrier within bomber range, roughly 1,000 miles off the coast of Japan. And I tried to do some research on where they went, but I wasn't able to find it. But roughly 1,000 miles off the coast of Japan. And then send 16 B-25 bombers to bomb the mainland. So 16 bombers to bomb the mainland. And they are actually able to do this. 15 of the bombers, since they can't land back onto the carrier, they're too heavy and too large to do that, 15 of them land in China. And then one of them gets diverted to Russia or the Soviet Union. And out of the 80 crewmen, all of the planes get lost, but out of the 80 crewmen, 3 are killed in action, 8 are captured, and 3 are killed in captivity by the Japanese. But for the most part, a hugely successful operation. Only months after Pearl Harbor, the U.S. is able to attack the Japanese mainland. So once again, more of a psychological victory than a strategic one, but a major psychological, I guess you could say, accomplishment from the Allied point of view. And so then you can fast forward, so this was in April, then you can fast forward to May, where you have the first major naval engagement between the Japanese and the American Navy. And that happens at the Battle of Coral Sea, or the Battle of the Coral Sea. Coral Sea, which occurs roughly over there. And this is significant because the battle itself, it actually, the U.S. loses more than the Japanese do, but it's able to cripple the Japanese Navy enough so that as they go into their next major offensive, they don't have quite the firepower that they need. And that next major offensive happens in June at Midway. Let me make sure you can read this. I know it's hard. I don't want to write on top of Coral Sea. So this is in June. You have the Battle of Midway. The Battle of Midway. And at the Battle of Midway, this is a Japanese offensive. Their goal is to further knock out the United States. But it ends up going the other way. And this is considered a big deal. This is the first Japanese naval loss since the Battle of Shimonoseki Straits in 1863. So you have a U.S. victory here. A lot of historians even consider this one of the most significant naval battles of all times. But you have a U.S. victory here. And once again, this is only 6 or 7 months since Pearl Harbor. So you have Coral Sea, which is able to cripple the Japanese Navy. Maybe cripple is a strong word, but it's able to kind of pare them down a little bit. Then you have Midway, which is a major U.S. victory. And then that takes us to August, where you have the Battle of Guadalcanal. So you have the Battle of Guadalcanal, where the U.S., there are several islands over here. The U.S. are attempting to take it. The Japanese want to retake it. But between kind of the on-the-ground forces and the naval forces, the U.S. is able to defeat the Japanese and keep them from taking Guadalcanal. And this is a big deal because between Midway and Guadalcanal in 1942, this is kind of the turning point. After this point, Midway, the Japanese went on the offensive here. The Japanese tried to get the U.S. out of Guadalcanal in August. But in both of those, the U.S. are able to defeat the Japanese at Midway. They're able to kind of fend them off at Guadalcanal. And so this is the turning point where the U.S. is able to now go on the offensive. So 1942 is a very, very big deal. It's only months after Pearl Harbor, months after the U.S. enters the war, but it's able to start turning the tide and start to go on the offensive against the Japanese in the Pacific. And what we'll see in the next video is 1942 also marks the turning of the tide in Europe.